would feel so good. Just
Yeah.
some friend to be able to hold hands with while you pray. I mean, just that kind of stuff. And so loneliness builds up, and then out of loneliness comes a lot of other stuff. And we wanted to talk about that. And Gianna Anderson attends our church, goes to our church, is involved in our church, is involved in one of the small groups there, has been a teacher for several things, has offered a seminar to the deacons in areas of cultural understanding and reaching out. And I thought, boy, this would be perfect for her. And thankfully, she said yes. I didn't know how many people were going to be with us because a lot of people come in afterwards and listen to it on recording. But I'm glad you're here because you give her an audience. So she's going to talk to you today. So take this personally. Don't be sitting there saying, oh, I wish so and so was listening. This is for us. Okay. So, Gianna, thank you for coming and thank you for helping us understand how to minister to our families by keeping ourselves emotionally strong.
Great. So I'm going to click on, I have a PowerPoint. I'm excited to be here. So I'm going to try to share that first and get that up. And then.
Okay, you might need to slide your pictures either to the top or over to the side in order to give the full screen, okay? And you just do that by putting your cursor on it and moving it.
So I'm having a problem getting my computer to work.
Okay, Gianna, you want to put it on?
There we go. I got it.
Yeah, there you go.
I got it. Okay.
Good. That's perfect. Thank you.
Good. So thank you for having me here. A little bit more about myself. I am a clinical psychologist in couples and family therapy, and I have a private practice in Newport Beach where I've worked for over 20 years. And my specialty is couples therapy, and I'm trained in some research-based modalities, Gottman method, emotionally focused couples therapy. Some of you may have heard of that. And then in my other life, I was a professor for 7 years. So that's the role, that's the hat I have on today. You're going to see that part of me. So we're back in school. And I've been married for 32 years. And like I said, I've been attending South Shores for over coming up on 10 years. And hi, Bill and Karen, we are in a growth group together there. So, all right. So ministry to your family by keeping yourself emotionally strong. Because of the pandemic, we are forced to meet over Zoom rather than meeting together, which is somewhat of an oxymoron because today we are isolated people alone together addressing loneliness.
Yeah.
Let's jump in. All right. Multiple researchers have spent years trying to figure out where in the world are the happy people who live the longest. And they found them. And they figured out why. They call the areas the blue zones. The one consistent finding to living a long and happy life was that the people in the blue zones had an unusually high degree of social connection. Social connection. We are now approaching a year having to remain socially isolated to keep us safe from the virus. Interestingly, science shows that chronic loneliness actually causes biological changes that weakens our defenses so that we are more susceptible to catching a virus. We are definitely in a predicament. Social connection leads to a long and happy life, but higher chance of catching COVID. Social isolation leads to loneliness, shorter life, less happy, but lower risk of catching COVID. So for some of us, the fear and anxiety around catching COVID is driving us towards loneliness. But as Americans, We are very good at solving problems, and we have been hard at work at finding good solutions to this predicament. Where we need to begin to address this is with our reactions to this predicament, which means talking about our emotions. Now, some of you cringe at the topic of emotions, and some of you get excited. Let me explain. So, as a therapist working with couples, one of the top complaints that men and women have about their marriage is related to emotions. So, for women, they said this: I wish my husband was more willing to share his feelings with me. And for the men, they said, I have difficulty dealing with my wife's moodiness.
Oh,
So emotions play a big role in how we relate to each other, and we often approach emotions from different perspectives. The emotion we're focusing on today is loneliness. So even before COVID, loneliness was and is an epidemic. Loneliness is culturally frowned upon, and it is curable. Let's get into the solution by identifying what emotional strength is in general. I'm going to show you two sayings, and I'd like you to think about which one resonates more with you. So here's the first one. Don't let your emotions distract you from doing what needs to be done. Control your emotions, or your emotions will control you. So does this in part kind of describe your view of emotional strength? Or does this one? Never apologize for being sensitive or emotional. It's a sign that you have a big heart and that you aren't afraid to let others see it. Showing your emotions is a sign of strength. Does this in part describe your view of emotional strength? Here they are again, side by side. Which one fits your view? The one on the left, that one encourages us to keep calm and carry on. The other one says, let some steam off. I would argue it's both. Keep calm and let off steam.
okay.
So what does it mean to be emotionally strong? To be emotionally strong is to understand the logic of our emotions. We do not want to suppress our emotions, nor do we want to be controlled by them. Ecclesiastes 3:4 says, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. God created us with emotions. So here's the textbook definition of emotional strength. Emotional strength is the capacity to understand emotional information and to reason with emotions. So again, emotional strength is the capacity to understand emotional information and to reason with emotions. So I read this definition to my husband, and this was his response. I have no idea what that means. So let me break it down to what I call the 4 F's. The first F, find a feeling. So this is part of the letting off steam. So you feel your feeling so that you can label it. This helps you identify what's wrong. Negative feelings are a red light, stop, something's wrong. And if you blow through a red light, it will tend to control you. So let me give you an example. All right, let's say your daughter asked you weeks ago to watch your grandkids for the day, and she calls that morning, the day they were to come over, and cancels. You have planned, you bought all their favorite meals for the day, and you even had it cooking in the oven when you got the call. Step 1, find a feeling. Step 2, find the message that the feeling is telling us. So the message is about our needs. Identifying and labeling our feelings is a very efficient and effective way to identify our needs. For example, if I am scared, I need protection. If I am sad, I need comforting. If I'm mad, I need to address what's blocking my goal. And if I am lonely, I need to connect. So back to our example. If that happened to me, I'm going to go with the feeling of loneliness. If it happened to my husband, he would go with anger. But for both of us, the underlying message from our feelings is that we are disconnected from our grandkids, which are important people in our lives. So then we move to step 3, find the truth of the message. Now, all feelings are authentic. There's a place in the brain that they're firing, but they're not always the best indicators of reality. So it's helpful to sort out our true need from the exaggerated part of the feelings in the moment. Back to our example. Now, I could exaggerate my feelings of loneliness by thinking, I'll never get to see them again, and thinking that they don't even want to be around me. The true part of my feelings is that I like to be around them, and I feel less lonely when I am. So that is what I need to focus on. The false part of the message is that I won't get to see them because they don't want to be around me. I let that go because if I didn't let it go, I would withdraw and pout. But once I've identified the true part of the message of my feelings, I then move on to step 4, find the solution to meet the need and act on that solution. This is the keep calm and carry on part. So keeping calm is identifying and not acting on the exaggerated part of our feelings. And the carrying on is applying the solution. So back to the example. So instead of withdrawing in my loneliness and sulking and eating all the food myself, all by myself, instead, I decide to reach out, text the grandkids to tell them I'm thinking of them, share a fun story or a YouTube video, and then reach out to my daughter to reschedule a date so I have something to look forward to. So I accurately solved my loneliness by reconnecting with my family instead of sulking. All right, so what does loneliness look like? The months of the pandemic have unified Americans, and that we all have been exposed to the conditions that could cause feelings of loneliness. Loneliness is the emotionally painful response to disconnection from people. There are 3 dimensions of connectedness: intimate, social, and community. Each dimension can lead to loneliness when they are missing or neglected. Intimate connections. These are people that we share a mutual bond of trust and affection with. It includes our spouse, close friends, family members. We spend about 60% of our time on these relationships. Generally, we have up to 15 people in this category, with 5 of those people who are the closest to us and take up the majority of our time. Social connections. This group includes our more casual friendships. They may not know our deepest secrets like intimate connections, but we enjoy them in our lives. Now, they are just as important as the intimate group. Growing up, these social connections were much easier to maintain because they were often classmates in school. And as adults, it's much harder to establish these. But we do so by being involved in organized groups, clubs, such as knitting, walking, woodworking, choir, Bible studies, and we can generally develop up to 150 people in this category. All right, let's talk about how to really juice up these social connections. Research found that a powerful way to develop this type of connection is engaging with others in rhythmic, synchronized sound or movement. So examples include being in the choir, creative writing or crafting groups. My favorite, dancing. Even saying the Pledge of Allegiance together can turbo boost these connections. Although doing physical exercise alone is good, doing it with others is better. So instead of doing our stretches or our weights alone, find ways to do it together, even if it's virtually. And here's a research study that shows this. A study was done with college rowers. They found that when a rower went from individual rowing to coordinated team rowing, it increased their endorphins 100-fold. So I started to think about maybe us together, we could do some synchronized movements, but then I realized we don't necessarily can see everybody. So I thought of something else. I'm sure you've all done this at a sporting event, and it's my favorite part of a sporting event, the wave. All right, so I'm going to bring a picture of on the screen of the wave, and when it gets to you, if you feel like it, do the wave with me. All right, so look at your screen, and when the wave gets to you, you can do the wave.
Oh, wow.
Here it comes.
Woo!
Woohoo! All right, good job. So we did some synchronized movement. All right. So the next one is community connections. This is our larger network of social connections that are more peripheral. They too contribute to a sense of belonging. They are amicable relationships such as work colleagues, acquaintances at church, professional organizations, people in your neighborhood. Although we do not know them to a very deep degree, the flicker of recognition, a welcoming smile, or a greeting from someone who remembers our name makes us feel known in subtle but meaningful ways. It helps us feel rooted in our place where we live. We generally have up to 500 people in this group. Now, when we have all three dimensions of connectedness, intimate, social, community, going well, we literally, emotionally, and physically thrive. If we are lacking in any one of the three dimensions, we can feel loneliness, the need for the intimate, the social, the community connections explains why, even if we're in a healthy marriage, we can experience loneliness for friends and community. Now, loneliness is not the same as being alone. Alone or solitude is time where you voluntarily choose to be alone. Solitude actually protects us from loneliness because being alone provides time to personally reflect and connect with God. Time with God reminds us we are never truly alone. So how do we know when we are sliding into loneliness? Initially, loneliness may be masked. Then it may move into mild distress. Finally, in its worst condition, it is felt profoundly and may trigger serious depression. Loneliness is triggered at different thresholds depending upon your need for level of social connections, expectations, or culture. Not everyone is equally susceptible to loneliness. Some feel lonely since the day they were born, others experiencing it fleetingly and rarely. Each of us has our own rhythm of pacing of how much connection we need. Men and women have roughly equal rates of loneliness, but they don't always express or experience loneliness in the same way. Some men tend to not admit feeling lonely to others or to themselves. If men do not talk about feeling lonely, then loneliness may manifest in behavioral changes like irritability, impatience, withdrawing, low energy, or decline in health. A lot of women tend to notice when feeling lonely and talk about it more openly. Because women have historically been responsible for the nurturing role for building connections, when those connections falter, women may be susceptible to blaming themselves, which compounds their loneliness. I've made a list of possible signals that may indicate you are slipping into loneliness. They are categorized as external, behavioral, and internal. So external are things happening outside of us, behavioral is our actions, and internal are our thoughts and feelings. Next, I'm going to show you a list of each of these categories, and as you look over the list, write down which ones you may identify with. Now, everyone is different, and the signals I have listed don't always indicate that you are lonely, but they can. Now, sometimes we are better at seeing loneliness in someone else than in ourselves, right? So if you want to, you can look through the list, perhaps identify your friend or your family member's signals if you don't want to look at your own. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the first one are the external signals, and I'll just give you a minute to read through those, and you can just notice which ones you may identify with and write them down for later if you'd like.
Hmm.
Did you get a chance to read through all those?
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is behavioral signals. Again, look through those and just see any that you may identify with. Did we get through that list?
Yep.
The last one is internal signals. These are our feelings, thoughts, and physical changes. And you can look through that list.
Wow.
Did you get through that list? Okay. So if you do feel lonely, it is not a weakness in you. It is not an accusation against you. It is actually proof that your innate search for connections is intact and working properly. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw it back to you guys. Would you be willing to share either what stood out to you or if you had questions about what's on the list? And I know this is getting recorded, so I don't know, Ron, if we want to do this or not, but
Sure. Sure. It might.
Okay, I can stop the recording for this part and then start it again when we're done
that's
sharing.
great.
Okay? Okay, go ahead.
So what to do for loneliness? Here's a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. So some days all we can do is crawl. And I like this quote because it reminds me I'm not the only one who is at times crawling.
Yeah.
And the reason we're talking about loneliness is that it is a serious subject. And as a therapist, I recognize the importance of not giving simple solutions that sound Pollyannish. Now, you may find that some of the solutions do sound simple, but they have been found to help with intense loneliness. They are simple, but not necessarily easy. And a great example is from a study conducted in 2017 that asks the question, does becoming a volunteer reduce loneliness in recently widowed older adults? And the researchers found widows generally tended to be much lonelier than married women. However, there was one notable exception. Widows who started volunteering in some service activity for an average of 2 or more hours a week were no lonelier than the volunteers who were married. So volunteering, it works, even in those really hard scenarios where we've lost our mate. So here is what we can do to help with loneliness. Obviously, one is to connect with people from each of the 3 dimensions: intimate, social, and community. So I wanted to throw it out to you. We've been in this pandemic, right? We've already talked about how we can't get connected, but what are some creative ways that you guys have been able to connect even during the pandemic? Just throwing it back to you guys. Any creative ideas?
Well, Barb and I walk, and we see people as we walk. Sometimes we know who they are because we recognize them, but most of the time we don't, and they have a mask on, so we're not sure whether we know them or not. So you try to greet one another with your eyes or with a hand or something like that, but just that physical contact to kind of say there's other people in the world, and they're at least friendly toward us. They're not hostile toward us. And that's where we are. That's where we've had to be.
I have been painting, but like I'm not very creative, but it's painting by number.
Fabulous.
Yep.
And I just finished it this morning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, I am by myself when I'm doing that, but it does calm you down.
Absolutely.
Our secret was getting a golden retriever puppy
Oh,
who will not leave you alone. He was not going to let you social distance or put a mask on. And so we have an unauthorized dog park about several blocks from us, which he's ready to go every morning at 6:30, whether it's light or dark. And we have a group that we maintain social distance, and the dogs play, and we get to chat. So that's been our change.
That's great. Good.
Yeah.
So a couple of the other ones. So I have up there, obviously you guys have already learned how to do the technology, but I wanted to point out that I have up there, ask an adolescent for help. So even if you guys all know how to do it, you can still ask an adolescent and pretend like you don't know. And the reason why I say that is because adolescents are at a high risk. They're in a high risk group for loneliness. And so like we talked about, getting people into serving others, right? Having that purpose by asking an adolescent, we're helping them, right? So you can reach out to Eric, I don't know, mask up and do all that. Another one, have you guys heard of the Our Photo app?
No.
So that is an app where we bought this from my in-laws, and it's a picture frame that sits on their counter, and all the kids and grandkids, our phones are linked to it. And we can send a photo with a message. And so it's on their counter, and it just scrolls through, and then new ones pop up, and they're loving that. It just connecting us with them. And then the other one, the spinning heart box you see on there with the little heart, that's kind of similar, but normally there's a lid on that. And then those are connected to all your family and friends' phones, and they can send a message. And when you send a message to that person, the little heart spins. And so it's like sending a little love message, right? And then you open the box, and then you get to see the message. So those are kind of some fun ways, but to still connect, right? And you talked about, Ron, about connecting with the community. I just want to emphasize that community is very important. Now we've lost a ton of that. So if you can, mask up, go to Trader Joe's and chat up the checker, right? They're really good conversationalists. So, or if you get Uber Eats, when the deliverer person comes, You know, talk to them a little bit. Ask them, what's the strangest food item you've ever delivered? Or what's the biggest tip you ever got? And then try to beat it, you know, something like that. These small micro moments are very powerful for dealing with loneliness. Send a note to the pastor, volunteer, those kind of things. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about is the quality of our connections can be just as important, if not more so, than the quantity of them. So like Ron talked about at the beginning, you've already heard Jim Burns, Steve and Becky Harling talk on communication skills, such as listening well, being present, communicating understanding and acceptance to improve the quality of your connections with your family members. Therefore, I'm not going to talk about communication skills. Rather, I will focus on the role feelings may have on the quality of our connections. All right, so feelings are like music that move us. Feelings are like music to life's movie. So I want you to listen to this soundtrack and guess which movie is it from? Can you guess?
You couldn't hear it.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
you
can't
couldn't
hear
hear
it.
it? Oh no. Shoot. Well, it was Star Wars.
Oh, we
Oh.
don't.
You know that one, right?
Yeah.
Shoot, I wonder why it didn't come through. Oh well. So you've already experienced life without music then, right?
Oh, we just did.
A good illustration.
All right, so here's my next one. So I'm going to show you a movie clip from Star Wars with the music turned off.
Oh yeah, this.
It's different. Isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah. Where's the music?
So it's kind of hard to pay attention without the music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of dull. All right. So in my work, when spouses are not able to express their emotions, I find it tends to erode the relationship. Sharing of emotions with one another leads to higher levels of trust and feeling connected. Now we're going to do a role play. This is Ron's role play. Ron, are you ready for me with this?
I'm ready. I've really been practicing because this is my lifestyle.
This is it. All right. So I want you guys to listen to the difference between the two conversations that Ron and I are going to have. One uses emotions and humor, and the other one doesn't. So notice how it kind of feels. Okay, so let me get ready. I got to get into a different mood. You ready for me, Ron?
Yeah.
So I'll start. Jim, what did the doctor say today?
Nothing new. Need to watch my blood pressure, eat less, come back in a month.
Okay, so that was the first one. Now listen to the next one. Jim, I'm very anxious to hear what the doctor said today.
I was really concerned because the doctor told me my blood pressure test showed I hadn't changed, even though I've been taking the meds and dieting this past month. And I was even a little embarrassed because my weight has not dropped. But I like my doctor. He joked around about how you must be a really good cook. I just kept thinking it is not your healthy cooking, but those donuts at my men's Bible study that I He encouraged me not to stress out because he's confident that we'll be able to reduce my blood pressure, which made me feel really, really good.
So which Ron did you like listening to better? The first one or the second one?
Number 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I did too.
Right. So good quality connections include sharing your positive and negative feelings, thoughts, and experiences. And of course, don't forget the humor. The use of emotional expression helps the listener, right? So we've been talking about listening, but we also want to help the listener listen to us. So by sharing that, it adds that music. So the next suggestion, which has already kind of been touched on because you guys are so advanced and smart, for dealing with loneliness is when you can't get a hold of a loved one, you can't connect with anyone, you truly are all alone and feeling lonely. And there is a solution to that, and it was named earlier, and that is to create. Have you ever been caught up in a project that you lost track of time, went without sleeping or eating? That's what we're talking about. And they found that the act of creating dampens down our loneliness. So creating meaning build something, write cartoons or jokes, painting, baking, crafting, playing music, dancing, or look at other people's creativity, right? Art throughout history has been used as a way to express our love, joy, and loss. So I wanted to throw it back out to you guys again. I know one of you already told us about painting by numbers, which is what I would need. What are your creative outlets? What have you guys done? Woohoo! Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, naughty
You've been
ladies
doing it right now.
a lot of hats. Making a lot of hats.
Well, I our granddaughter was going back up to Stanford to college, and she was going to have to, quarantine for 10 days and have no one. So I went back through pictures of stuff we'd done with them, and I made her a book with 150 pictures from when she was a baby up till now.
Oh,
that's sweet.
That's wonderful. And then, so you're connected to the stories. And so that probably really helped with not feeling lonely. And you're creating a story in the book and doing something.
It reminded me of things that we had done together, and it reminded her too. And she said, I'd forgotten so many things. And so it was fun for both of us.
That's a great idea. I think, Bill, you do a lot of woodworking.
I do, and lately I haven't been making a lot of larger furniture products, but I've been building toys for grandchildren and now great grandchildren, which is it's a blessing in two ways.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that sense of purpose is involved in that, and then creating and those things. Good. Great. So then the final suggestion has to do with our relationship with God. As I briefly mentioned, we are truly never alone. The first 2 words of the Lord's Prayer demonstrates this, which which starts Our Father. So before we begin to ask even for our daily bread, just realize that we, such as we are, in the presence of such a being who knows all about us, what is good for us, he knows all our needs, he hears our every sigh and loves us with an everlasting love. I suggest that if we can say from our heart, whatever our condition, my Father, in a sense, our prayer is already answered. With the realization of our relationship to God, we are never alone. And that's what I have for you guys today. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jana.
Thanks, Jana.
Jana, very interesting.
Oh,
Well,
good.
I know this tape is going to bless so many people who will watch it maybe over and over again, because maybe at a moment of great loneliness, they'll find great comfort in this. Any questions that you that are watching have? We have a couple minutes.
I don't have any questions. I was just going to say that my kids make fun of me because I talk to everybody at the grocery store now.
Good idea.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yep, that's what we got to do right now. We got to
Yeah.
take it what we can with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Jana, where did you get the spinning heart box?
Yes. So, have you heard of? If you just Google spinning art box, you'll
Got
find
it.
a bunch of different vendors. But Uncommon Goods is where I found it. It's called Uncommon Goods.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
No, that's a great idea.
So yeah, I think you talked, Sharon, about, your son not coming out, right? So, I mean, I think it'd be talking about he can have that intimate connection, but he may find it doesn't resolve it because we need the other levels.
Mhm.
So if he's still feeling lonely, it might just be because he's not getting the other levels of connection, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and it
And
sounds
he-
so simple, and how in the world
Yeah.
could something so simple have an effect on such a profound, intense feeling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So sometimes
Well,
we
I'm
have to
going to
suspend
suggest the crafty because he used to like to make things. And so I'm going to suggest that to him. Yeah, if I can get him to do at least one thing, working in the right direction.
Great. So that resonated. Perfect. Mhm.
Okay, Gianna, thank you again and again. Appreciate it.
Thank-
This was
Thanks, you
really,
guys.
really very, very good. Very good. And it's going to be